believe in guiding a society according to philosophies, because I think philosophies are created by human beings. They're as subjective as anything else. Philosophies and people who believe in them, what they do is they follow something that they believe in as a sort of line of delineation between this is right and this is wrong and this is why. But sometimes you put a philosophy into practice and you see that there are certain unanswered questions by your so-called philosophy. So there's plenty of people walking around who have a philosophy, and philosophies don't take all of reality into account because they are the work of subjective human beings who said, I think I came upon a certain ideal and a way of defining reality, and this makes something right and that makes something wrong. And I think when you're beholden to a philosophy and it becomes part of your identity and you say, this is what I believe in, when your philosophy is challenged, you look at that person as challenging something that is the holy thing that you believe in, and it turns you into a fundamentalist. It turns you into somebody who is there to defend your philosophy because it is part of your identity and it is part of what you agree with and it's what you've dedicated your life to. So I think political philosophies are just as closed-minded and as bad as religion. I think people who are involved in politics are just as capable of fundamentalist behavior as somebody who is a religious zealot. So I think politics in too many ways seems to be becoming the new religion. You know, I don't listen to those facts. Those are liberal facts. I don't listen to those facts because that's conservative propaganda, etc. But I think you got to take all facts into account in order to come to your decision about things. But philosophy is a sort of defining of reality according to a certain set of terms. But I think people who come up with ideas, new or old, can get their terms wrong, can misdefine reality very easily. So it leaves me in a weird spot because people ask me, they say, well, what is it that you believe in? And there's not a clear answer on that, which makes me a flake, which makes me somebody who can't be trusted. It makes me somebody who may change his mind about things. It makes me somebody who's not a strong leader, somebody who doesn't believe in anything, somebody who kind of takes the path of least resistance, somebody who kind of says, well, it's a little bit this way or it could be a little bit that way. He's kind of indecisive. He's kind of limp. You know what I mean? And I guess I'm not an ideologue. I'm not somebody who believes particularly in anything. And I think that not believing in anything gives you a much clearer head when you look around and you see all of these other people who believe in something, never questioning whether or not what they believe in is actually true. I don't want to talk to people about politics, about the way to run the world, and people say, well, I believe in smaller government, or I believe in the... What you believe, it doesn't matter what you believe in. We're talking about the right way to run the world. How would you run it? Or what is the best way to run it? And then they say, well, I believe in these ideals. It's not an idealistic question, how one should run the world for the benefit of the majority. You simply let the majority of people decide what's best for them based on their own arbitrary values and what is the most efficient system to provide people with what it is that they want. Now, that's completely nihilistic in a moral sense. And I think a lot of what people want is wrong. But who am I to stand in their way? People are going to vote in this election cycle. And I can already see they're going to vote for a lot of people that I don't like. Who am I to take that away from them? After all, a democracy is a tyranny of the majority. And even if the majority of the people are wrong about something, I think we have to say people have a right to be wrong. Same thing with freedom of speech. People have a right to be wrong. They have a right to say things that are stupid. They have a right to say things that are wrong. They have a right to vote for the candidate of their choice. And if the candidate of their choice is somebody who's going to make the world a worse place, and I look at that candidate and I say, I don't want that guy to win, well, if I'm outnumbered by a bunch of people who, even if it's because they're stupid, vote for that candidate, who am I to say that people who are dumber than me shouldn't have the same rights as me? Will it ruin the world? Will it make the world a worse place for me to live in? Yep. It'll also make the world a worse place for them to live in. But who am I to stop other people? It's kind of like stopping the little baby from putting his hand up on the hot stove. You tell him 3 times don't do that, but every time your back is turned, he's going to put his hand on that stove. After a while, you let them put their hand on the stove and burn themselves. And they scream and cry, and that's when you look at them and say, I told you so. So, that's part of growing up. And I think maybe our society needs to grow up a little bit. And where do you learn? You learn from mistakes. And I don't view the politicians as being in charge of this country. I've stopped blaming them. It's the people who vote them in who cause them to get in there. It's the media that reports the so-called facts to the people that the people take seriously. And the media is owned by whoever has the most money, and those become the issues to defend those with the most, because they have the power to control the issues. And we're kind of stuck in somebody else's world all the time, a world that we don't have very much control over. And I would prefer to examine new ideas about how we, the people, can actually have control of the world that we live in, and how can we have more rights. And if you come up with an idea of somehow us having more rights by getting the government out of things, I don't see the government as actually being in my way, to be totally honest. I don't think the government is the problem right now. I think the government really hasn't done anything. I don't see how somebody can look around this economy and look at the fact that we have an administration. It was majority Democrats. It was a Democratic president. Nothing stopping them from pulling our troops out of Iraq and Afghanistan. But they didn't. And they get criticized, at least Barack Obama does, for these bailouts. Now, I agree with the Tea Party movement on that one issue and disagree with them about everything else, about how the bailouts shouldn't have happened. What he did was he took a big pile of federal money and handed it off to a bunch of CEOs and people who ran a bunch of different industries in an attempt to create or protect jobs. Now, what happened? Well, they took the money, they put it in their own pocket, and no jobs were created. Very predictable. But you see, doesn't that prove the point that trickle-down economics doesn't work? Doesn't that disprove the whole theory that if you cut taxes for all the CEOs and the wealthy people, that they're somehow going to go out there and pay the money down or create jobs? If the government hands them a big pile of money to do that, and instead they don't do any of that, but they just run off with the money, then if you gave them a tax cut, they would also do the same thing. It just seems apparent. It's the nature of the beast. So we can't trust the private sector to run this world, nor can we completely trust the government to run this world. But as far as I can see it, I don't see the government really running anything. They just seem to be a bunch of bureaucrats. And if you want to elect a different group of bureaucrats in there, a bunch of people who want smaller government, and they want to limit the size and power of government and all this other stuff, does that mean that there's a bunch of people out there on food stamps that are no longer going to get them? Does that mean there's a bunch of people on welfare out there who's no longer going to get that? And people say, yeah, get rid of them deadbeats. Well, can they get a job? Are there jobs out there for the people? No. And I think it's because I don't believe this notion that the private sector even wants to create jobs. When they get money to do so, they don't do it. Whether it's from the mission of any company is always to make a profit, and they'll take the profit and they'll put it in the pockets of only the people who run the company, and they've demonstrated that by being in, the corporate sector just being in favor of all the outsourcing, putting all the jobs out of this country, and that's been a long-term thing. It started way back when, and I think that's the real cause of this bad economy. I don't think it's been too much government spending that's caused this bad economy, and I think when the private sector sort of recedes from being able to provide for people what idealistically they're supposed to, now the answer of the other side seems to be, well, let's get rid of the government. That'll make everything better. Now that we have more people depending on the government than ever before, time to get rid of the government. What are these people going to do? You don't want to regulate maybe the banks or the mortgage industries. That might mean you're going to throw a lot of people out on the street who weren't there before at this horrible time, which is the worst economy I have ever seen in my life. I'm not even going to say don't blame the government at all, but I noticed that the structure of the private sector itself, the way it conducts itself, isn't getting blamed. It's only the politicians who are getting blamed. And I'm starting to view politics more and more as the red cape used in a bullfight. That's the thing to distract you. It's all the politicians' fault. Vote them out, put some other people in. However, I cannot deny that the people who have been in charge of this country really haven't changed much of anything. But neither did the private sector. I think when they get money, they don't. It's pretty obvious. You could say that an increase in profits will somehow benefit this economy. Not if it doesn't increase the wages of the people who work. Not if nobody sees any of that money and people who charge you for your daily living expenses, whether it's rent, electricity, or water, or food, the prices of everything going up while the wages of everyone is going down. I'm getting tired of living in a society where the lives of the actual people who have to live in it are considered to be irrelevant, and if you haven't gone out there and gotten rich and you can't afford to meet your expenses, somehow you're a deadbeat. You're someone to be blamed for the bad economy. And I just don't buy that narrative. I don't buy that narrative. I can't. I don't think it's people's fault that they don't have any money. I really don't. But this other group of people, they seem to see it the other way, and they seem to blame the government. Will they win this time? Most likely. I went out and I voted, and we'll see what happens. It doesn't look pretty, but like I said, the metaphor of the baby putting the hand on the stove, maybe the country has to do worse, maybe other ideas need to be pursued. And if you shrink the government, if that means that people out there who used to be getting assistance aren't getting it anymore, and there's no private sector job there for them to get, you're basically telling people to go fuck themselves. And telling people to go fuck themselves, that's not a philosophy that I can get behind. So that's why I had to vote the way that I did. Until next time, I really don't know what else to say. Whatever happens, happens. Try to stay cool, everybody. Try to stay human.